Okay. Firestall, thank you for the sub, dude. 2 month streak. 4 months total. Second month. Cat cam. All right, so why don't you take us through a little bit? And guys, for those of you who don't know, the reason why we do Zath Chats here is just to kind of get some tips and some suggestions out there and that sort of deal. So today we're going to be doing commander builds, core builds for carriers. So in other words, what's your first 10 to 14 points that you're going to put in? Because you can get up to that pretty darn quick. Chat, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
I'll be back in a few minutes.
And we'll go through all that kind of stuff. All right. Admiral Fox, nope, I did not get to your Minotaur game. Okay, so with me is TM Grunty. He is a carrier. Do you consider yourself a carrier main or just a carrier lover?
Yeah, I'm not a main. I pretty much play carriers and destroyers equally now.
Okay. So we're not worried about the specific carrier right now, as Yak Diego is already putting in his suggestion for a fighter build enterprise. Any carrier, let's I guess start with American, but I mean, most of the carriers I would imagine have the same core build, correct?
Yeah, the core build is actually what I would consider only 9 points.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much what you start with every carrier.
Okay.
And after that, it differentiates pretty specifically for each individual CV/nation.
Right, because they all have different features, and so you want to play to those strengths of those features. So, what do you start with? What's your first 9 points then, Grunty?
Yeah, my first 9 points would pretty much always be air supremacy.
Okay, so that's the skill, of course.
5% more restoration or quicker restoration for the planes.
Yep.
My tier 2 skill is always improved engines, 2.5% more speed for the planes.
Right.
And then we have 2 tier 3 skills, which would be the aircraft armor and the survivability expert. Both of them work together nicely, buff the hit points of the planes, make them take less damage from continuous AA, so you don't lose as many planes.
Now, sorry, go ahead.
Which of one you take first is... Usually I would say the aircraft armor is actually the better skill, but the survivability expert is the better skill unless you have Cunningham, which is buffed for the aircraft armor. But 9 points is done so quickly. You probably have them at the same time because you're gonna start, unless you really start with a fresh captain on a tier 4 CV and level it up.
Okay. So,
but I would pretty much always use Commander XP to get the captain up to at least 9 points before I start playing a carrier.
Absolutely. I mean, generally speaking, you're going to do that with any ship that you're on. You want to try to boost your captain to 10 points to, get a core build going. And then from there, you can figure out what the strengths are for that ship and how you want to build it. And keep in mind, everybody's a little bit different as well, personality-wise, for how they play the game. But I would completely agree with you. These are probably the most important skills to have. Basically, you want your planes to come up faster. You want them to be quicker so they can get to targets quicker. And then you want them to survive longer, because if they survive longer, you're generally speaking doing more damage. You're getting more strike potential out there. But you're also not losing planes as quickly, which means that you don't get quote-unquote deplaned as fast. So all of those come in handy, and it doesn't matter what carrier you're in, those are all important. Now, can I ask you about a couple other commander skills?
Yeah, of course.
So you did not take enhanced aircraft armor as part of your core build, and why is that, sir?
Enhanced aircraft armor, that's the tier 4 skill that makes your planes take less damage from flak.
Yes.
So there's multiple reasons for it. First is, flak is something you can actively dodge in comparison to continuous AA.
Okay.
So if you are good and don't attack into ships or into a group of ships where there's tons of flak clouds in the air, you should be able to just avoid the flak altogether, which means you have no need for that skill.
And generally speaking, how do you dodge flak?
So the way flak works is when you are within the range of a surface ship, of its AA range, of the long range AA, that is what the flak shoots.
Mm-hmm.
That ship takes your current speed and heading of the planes into consideration and then shoots the flak clubs in that path. Now, there is a little bit of RNG involved where exactly those flak clouds will land, but generally they are in the direction where you're currently moving. So if you alternate the speed of your planes, or turn left or right, or even initiate an attack run which changes the altitude of the planes, you can dodge those flak clouds rather easily, unless there's like 10 or 12 in the air because you attack into multiple ships.
Got it. So if somebody is relatively new to carriers, then enhanced aircraft armor is a good idea because you're not used to dodging flak. You don't understand about, about only attacking isolated targets that, it's just one ship, one flak cloud that you're flying through, right?
Yeah.
So if you're new to carriers, you might want to consider enhanced aircraft armor once you've got your core build as your next skill.
Yeah, there are also certain ships where it's actually maybe not that bad to take because, for example, you could consider it on a Roosevelt because the planes are so slow and maneuver so poorly,
right,
that you are more likely to take flak in those because you can't dodge it as well as if you're in a maneuverable.
And yes, Jack Diego is correct. Once you get within usually 3.5 kilometers, flak shells do not appear anymore. So one of the things that you do with the Roosevelt, you were just talking about that, and I would agree with you. Actually, it's a good skill for Roosevelt. You can get into that flak air, into that 3.5 kilometer range, and then you just basically try to loiter in there. So you're only taking continuous damage. So whatever, but then you have to loiter for like 30 seconds or whatever till you can drop again. So, right.
Yeah. And there's another reason why I don't consider it. Like, if you are attacking ships that have good AA, like you see, if you look, for example, at a Des Moines, you can see how much a flak does. Let me just look at mine to get an idea, so I don't say something wrong right now. So the Des Moines here deals like 1680 damage with a flak puff. And like if a Des Moines has defensive AA that goes up by plus 300%.
Yep.
So we're talking like 6,000 damage per shell explosion. Like even if you reduce that by 25% again, that's still way too much damage. And your planes will die if you fly in a flak rod, even if you have that skill.
Got it.
So
if this was minus 40%, you'd be more tempted to take it then, essentially.
It depends on the CV in question and how much hit points the planes have. There are some that have very, very low hit points where it pretty much does nothing.
Right.
Like if your planes have only 1,000 hit points.
Right.
Whereas on the Roosevelt, again, they have a lot of hit points, so that will actually allow you to survive a flak hit again. So.
Got it. Right. Okay.
Very situational skill depending on the individual CV whether you take it. And 4-point skills are like there's a lot of good 4-point skills in this.
Right.
So.
Okay. And Yaka Diego, thank you. You're correct. I would agree with you. Dutch cruisers and Russian anti-air flak is very scary at tier 8 to 10, especially Petropavlovsk with that 6 kilometer radius for its anti-air guns. Okay, so that's our core build. You take pretty much about anywhere. And then you said that you branch out from there. So could you give us some suggestions for our viewers in how you like to scale out certain ships? And we can go through the tech tree, do some premium ships, all that good stuff, all right?
All right, so what I would take next is probably one of the 4-point skills on the left. Either the bomber speed or the torpedo
damage,
how's the actually called? The torpedo damage one, right?
Yeah, proximity fuse.
Proximity fuse. It pretty much depends on what is your CV doing. Do you do more of your damage usually with torpedoes, or do you do more damage with bombs, or do you maybe even the most damage with rockets. And whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
I like to buff that type of plane.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Okay.
So if we are, for example, looking at a Japanese CV that usually does the most damage with torpedoes, I would go with the torpedo, with the proximity fuse here.
Mm-hmm.
Now that skill is a little bit tricky too, because it actually only does something for you if you hit the torpedo protection.
Right.
If you hit the bow or the stern, this skill actually does nothing.
Because if
Against the destroyer, it also does nothing.
you look under here, under the Hakuryu, says survivability, torpedo protection, damage reduction, 16%. That's if you hit the torpedo bulge of the Hakuryu. So I'm going to back out again and go to armor layout. And so you guys can see, that's right here, the side plating torpedo protection. The front does not have it, as Grunty mentioned. And the rear does not have it either. So you have to be hitting it midsection in order for that skill to work. So your primary target in that case is going to be your slow lumbering battleships, maybe cruisers as well, like a Moskva or Stalingrad or something, where you can hit them on the side.
Yeah, you actually still want to hit them in the bow or the stern, ideally, because you still do more damage there, and you have a higher chance of causing a flooding.
Right.
But it's not always possible to actually land all the torpedoes in that. So
Right.
that skill helps when something goes in the broadside and hits like midsection.
But say hitting a torpedo on a destroyer, for example, this skill isn't going to help you because torpedoes.
No, it doesn't.
They don't have torpedo protection. So there you go. Okay. So and in line with that, you would also then buff the torpedo bomber skill here, the second pointer as well, right?
I would go with torpedo bomber that reduces the arming distance by 10%. That
Yep.
allows you to drop closer
Right.
to the ship, which gives them less time to dodge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's overall a pretty good skill.
Yep.
And you could also consider taking Swiftfish. Now, this skill is a little bit two-folded, though.
Mm-hmm.
It got nerfed. It used to be a flat 5 knots instead of 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you increase the speed of a torpedo, you also increase the arming distance again, because actually the game doesn't work on arming distance, but works on arming time.
Right. So the faster the torpedoes, the more time it takes for them to arm.
This means if you're dropping at point blank at the very minimum distance, Swiftfish is neutral. It does nothing for you, you just wasted 2 points. But whenever you drop from a little bit further out, it actually helps you, because the torpedo is more likely to catch up to the ship, especially if you want to drop something from behind. Like when you have not the fastest torpedoes, like not IGN ones, but USN ones or British ones.
Right.
Where it's easy for sometimes even a cruiser to outrun your torpedo. So that would be something I would probably take as my last points on the captain.
So,
but if you're torpedo centric on your CV, it's definitely worth considering.
Yep. And so we saw this, I believe the Lexington in my ranked battle earlier today had torpedo bomber because he dropped extremely close to the island and was still able to hit me. If he didn't have that, he might not have had the length to get there because, as you said, the torpedoes will cover a greater distance over the same amount of time if he's got Swiftfish enabled with this. So the other thing, too, is if you find yourself, when you drop your target with torpedoes, if you find that your target is able to maneuver and dodge most of your torpedoes, then you might want to consider Swiftfish because the faster they are, in general, harder it is for them to dodge those torpedoes. There's a little bit less reaction time. So, again, that comes down to you, the player, and what you're finding that's working and not working. Is there anything else for Japanese carrier that you typically like to take or consider?
That's pretty much it for the damage output thing.
Okay.
what my Hakiro, for example, has, I do have the side stabilization. It's one of the only CVs where I take it. But I'm not a big fan of that skill. You barely notice the difference. It's just like there was nothing else good to take anymore over because
Right.
the pyrotechnician doesn't do a whole lot for you because it only works for your rocket planes.
Right.
Enhanced armor piercing ammunition got nerfed. I don't think 3% more damage for the bombs is great.
This is only, in my opinion, this is only a potential pick in a German tech tree carrier because it's got both AP rockets and AP bombs.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because then you're helping 2 out of your 3 squadrons. Go back real quick on sight stabilization, chat, so you guys understand. Sight stabilization is a speed at which your reticule shrinks. As you start aiming on your target, your reticule slowly starts to shrink. Now, it gets worse if you maneuver. It starts to open back up again. So sight stabilization is very handy if you're the kind of person, and I fall victim to this a little bit too, where I hit A and D, right, to turn my planes instead of using the mouse cursor. And when you do that, it widens it. And then so sight stabilization might help negate some of that a little bit so you can maneuver a little bit more and still drop on your target. So if you find yourself hitting A and D a lot, sight stabilization might be helpful for you.
Doesn't help while it's blooming up again. Only once it stops blooming and then it goes.
Right.
Like it's been ages ago, even before the skill was nerfed a little bit too. There were some Reddit tables where someone actually took the numbers and with the skill and without the skill, how long it took for the reticle to fully shrink, and it was like less than half a second total that you gained with it.
Right. Right. So generally speaking, you're not going to take this skill. You might take it on, like Grunty said, on the Japanese carriers towards the very end of your drive to 21 points, basically. But
Yeah.
Okay. Any other skills here that you might consider on a Japanese carrier?
I mean, I've personally never done it, but it's technically possible to build a Japanese carrier instead of torpedoes for the AP bombs. But I wouldn't do it myself. In that case, you just have to switch out all the torpedo skills for the bomber relevant skills.
Yep.
And there's technically also a possibility for a fighter build. But I guess we can go over fighter build later with a different CV. Maybe.
Yeah, we can do that later. Would you consider taking Hidden Menace?
I never take that skill because it's still somewhat bugged.
Okay.
The problem with this skill is Wargaming recently added this as sort of a fix. The speed of the time to reach the safe attitude got added. But it still takes them longer or makes them more vulnerable during that period of time.
Right.
Because that speed of returning aircraft, the main downside of this skill, also affects the speed of the planes while they climb up to safety after your drop.
Right.
And they don't have to climb as much as now until they're safe, but they're still very slow during that process, which makes them very, very vulnerable to flak in that time.
Yep.
Not from the ship you actually dropped off, because you're inside that area, of course, but if there are more other ships around that could shoot flak on those planes, that flak will hit, and you will lose your planes in the process. So if you're not careful with this skill, it's very, very easy to get deplaned.
Right. So it's a bit of a noob trap. You got to be careful. It's kind of similar to Concealment Expert because it does give you, in a sense, a little bit better than Concealment Expert, 15% decrease to its detectability range, which does allow you to play a little bit closer to the enemy, but that could be a double-edged sword because it's very easy to be overrun, and then you're dead. So I think this is kind of like that skill where you like to play with fire.
I've seen it being used or heard about it being used on the Super CVs, where you mostly on the USS United States, where you focus on your tactical squadrons most
Yep.
because you don't care if those die after the drop.
Mm.
And it helps with one of the main weaknesses of the United States with the bad concealment.
Yep.
But you still have to be very, very careful because you can use your regular planes. And if you get deplaned on those, then you're limited on your tacticals.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so I think personally, the United States is probably the only ship where I would consider using that skill. I tried it on an Audacious together with the Legendary after they changed the skill, and I still don't like it. Like I lose too many planes with
Now-
that skill compared to without.
So you guys understand. Let's talk about the Audacious real quickly, and then we can go into the. I think we've talked through the Japanese carriers at this point, but we can talk about the Audacious and then get into the British carriers in general. But the thing about the Audacious is its unique upgrade is right here: forced takeoff and landing equipment, and this takes away 15% concealment as well, or boosts your concealment. So if you think about it, Hidden Menace and this together means that you're extremely sneaky-ish, I guess.
I think it's just above 10 kilometers concealment that you get.
Yeah.
So you could technically get very close.
Yep, and it was mentioned, Diego mentioned ranked. I mean, in ranked, something like this, you could do. In randoms, it's harder because there's more enemies. You have to really be thinking about where you're positioning your carrier. In ranked, you can get away with it a little bit easier, I would say. But in any
With
case...
what? Hidden Menace in ranked?
Yeah.
I wouldn't take it in ranked because in ranked, the ships tend to group up even more than in randoms.
Well, it depends. in my opinion, my experience, when I play carrier, my enemy team, man, they group up like a ball and they work together. My team spreads all the hell all over the place, and then they complain about not getting any air support. So
I would rather run a fighter build in ranked than using something with Hidden Menace.
okay, good, fair.
But
All right. So, Grunty, can you tell us a little bit about, for British carriers then, how would you spec out your British carriers?
all right, so my British carriers are mostly spec'd for torpedoes again. It's pretty much the same spec
Okay.
that we just talked on the Hakiryu, except for the sidestep. I took the pyrotechnician because the British carriers really rely a lot on fires,
Sure.
and I still buffed the torpedoes though with proximity fuse and torpedo bomber and also the swiftfish because Audacious torps are like 35 knots, and I want to get them at least up to like 39. So not everything can run away from it. But you definitely
Okay.
have options there. Like I've seen people do spec both proximity fuse and the bomber flight control, and not take the additional tier 2 skills. Like
what I've
you're
got.
showing right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Yep. In my build
And
here...
if that was a 21 point captain, you would probably just take the pyrotechnician on top, and then you're good.
Because you're right, because the rockets are HE rockets, and by the way, the British rocket planes are the best in general for taking out destroyers because of how quickly they will fire when you go into an attack prep. And then, of course, it's got HE bombs, they're carpet bombs, so pyrotechnician works really well for British carriers. I would agree with you there.
If you were running, like, if you want to, you could definitely run on the Eagle if you wanted that way with the bombers too and the speed. I'd probably more inclined to do that what you have right now on the Eagle than I would on the Audacious. But
Okay.
it's close. Like if you want to have the tier 2 skills for the torps or the bomber speed. What I would definitely do in your case though, if you want to take the bomber speed, take it at 21. I think the pyrotechnician is better than the second tier 4 skill.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Just because your bombs are limited in penetration. There's lots of ships you can't penetrate, and if you have to attack a Yamato because there's nothing else left,
Right.
you want to at least have a better chance of getting those fires going.
And this is only helping essentially one of your squadrons out of your 3 choices. So
No, it helps too. It helps the rocket planes as well.
does it?
It has fire chance for the rockets.
No, I'm talking about bomber flight control.
The bomber flight control. Yeah, that only helps you with the bombers, right?
Right. So I would agree with you. That's probably the least important of the skills, and pyrotechnician might be a better choice. But again, it comes down to how you, the player, wants to build it. Firestyle, we will get to that. Don't worry. That's on my mind. Anything else British carriers to discuss? I'd like to take a moment and talk about Indomitable, actually.
Indomitable.
Yes.
Well, the Indomitable is basically the same as an Audacious minus every single skill that applies to torpedoes because it obviously doesn't have one.
Okay, so Indomitable, if I could take over for just one sec, Indomitable is very important that you have last gasp because your squadrons, your bomber squadrons, only have 2 attack runs. So you drop 1. And I did this on stream a couple weeks ago. You drop 1, and then because of last gasp, that activates because now you're on your last attack flight. So you go full speed boost towards somebody, then you drop, and then you have last gasp, and that allows you to get over your enemy extremely quickly. You bomber flight control because you want speed out of those bombers. You don't really care too much about your rocket planes. Site stabilization, I don't know. I guess it helps. I have it on my build. Do you need it? I don't know. But pyrotechnician, because you're starting fires, is extremely important. So basically what you do with Indomitable is you find an enemy battleship that's all by itself and you make him cry until he burns to the waterline. And then you go find another one. And that's pretty much what you do.
I like last gasp in general on CVs that have only 3 attacks in the squadron. You have a decent chance of proccing it there.
Right.
I don't like it when you, for example, attack with the Hakuryu and you have like 12 planes and you attack with 2, so you have 6 attacks and it's not as good anymore.
Your torpedo bombers, right, exactly.
Yeah. But if you have like 9 planes in the squadron, you attack 3-3-3, I think last gasp is pretty good. I wouldn't take it early on, but if you have 1 point in the end over and your choices between last gasp and like improved engine boost, I'm inclined to take the last gasp, but bit preference there.
Sure. All right.
For my Indomitable, I have the last points. I have enhanced reactions there for the fighters.
Is that the
instead of the site stabilization?
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Otherwise, my build is identical.
Okay. So let's move on then. Can we do... I guess we could do German?
I guess the chat was just asked about a fighter build and a French one, so maybe we do the Bahn right now.
Okay, let's go to the Baron.
Go over that fight.
Sure. Where's the guy that I had in the Baron anyways? Recall? There. Okay. So this is an example of a fully fighter build carrier. Note I did not take the aircraft armor skill. And that's because for Baron, she's got skip bombers, and skip bombers don't spend a lot of time in continuous anti-air. So you can get away with not taking that if you want to. But can you talk us through like what these fighters skills do and why you take them?
I actually have the aircraft armor.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. So the most important one here is the enhanced reactions.
Which is the tier 4 skill.
That's a tier 4 skill. What this does is what happens when someone deploys fighters, it takes a while for them to arrive.
Yep.
It depends on the speed of the planes, how quick they come in. If we're talking about like the Bahn, I think it's about like 4 or 5 seconds until they're there. Oh no, probably less, maybe 3. And the same is basically true for ship deployed fighters as well, which is why people usually use them way too late.
Right.
So you have to drop them early. And then when an enemy plane goes into the range of the fighters, it takes another certain amount of time before your fighters actually recognize that there are fighters in their area and then try to chase them down.
Mm-hmm.
So what enhanced reaction does, it cuts the reaction time of those fighters down by 80%, which means the moment an enemy plane touches the fighter circle, it takes like less than a second and your fighters will latch onto them. The downside, however, is that it takes longer for the fighters to actually appear on the minimap after you call them.
Right. 50% longer.
It makes them an excellent defensive tool if you manage to deploy them early enough.
So you use this if you've ever had a situation where you find the enemy's planes coming your way, the enemy carrier's planes coming your way, you turn around, you get in front of them, and then you drop out your planes. Now, if you don't have enhanced reactions, generally speaking, that person that you're trying to block with your fighters can just hit W or just hit A or D and probably W and just zoom out of the area. But with enhanced reactions, if you time it exactly right, there's nothing that the enemy can do to dodge your planes other than recalling them, hitting the F key and saying, well, the hell with this, I'll go back to another squadron. So that's why...
Even the F key needs to be done quickly enough.
Yeah.
Like if he waits longer than a second, then the planes are gone.
Right. See you later, Johnny B. Bad. Okay. So
and,
what... Go ahead.
Sorry. No, you go.
So what's next on the fighter build?
The next skills you probably want to do if you go with the fighter builds are honestly the tier 1 and the tier 3 skill. Okay. The main thing about both of them is that it gives you additional 10% petrol radius, which makes the area your fighters cover larger. Right. So you can zone out more of the enemy map. And what the interceptor also does is it makes your fighters immune against enemy fighters. So usually what you often do is when there are enemy fighters on the map, you deploy your own fighters so the fighters just fight each other's and then you're free to move on with your planes and can attack what was in there.
Right.
If you have interceptor, that's not possible anymore. Like
well,
the enemy CV can't do that against you. No, right. You can't do it either because your fighters will also not attack fighters anymore.
Ah, okay. Right, I see that now. It says does not attack hostile fighters. So it's kind of like there's a bit of an opportunity cost of choosing this. But this is basically saying I'm going to completely lock out the enemy players' planes at the expense of fighters, and also it says it does not spot hostile ships. So if you're the kind of person that likes to put planes down to keep carriers detected, this isn't going to help you.
Yeah, but if you want to detect carriers, what you do, you can just park with your regular squadron in front of the enemy carrier. Yep. What you do with that build.
Yep.
And lock him out from playing, basically, because whenever he wants to launch planes, you deploy your fighters, his planes die, so he's not doing anything anymore. You're not doing anything either. I mean, I guess you hopefully spot him still with your main squadron and someone can take him out.
Yep.
Or you deplane him completely if he's stupid, and then you move on with your life.
So you don't need to take the second point here, but it helps because you get one extra patrol fighter or interceptor charge, which means that you can deploy these more frequently, right?
Yeah, I actually don't. You just because the barn already, I think, has 7 fighters per planes type. Or 8, even 8, and you have.
It might have 8 because I've got this taken. It says 9 down there.
So, but if you only have like 3 or 4, like on the super CVs, for example, I would take it.
Okay.
But on the barn, I don't take it, and I also cut one of the 1-point skills. Like I don't have last gasp, and with these 3 points together, I took the aircraft armor. Yeah.
Okay. Because
like I haven't played the barn that much, but I haven't run out of fighter consumables with it now.
Okay.
So
and again, this comes down to player choice. If you're finding you're running out of your plane consumable and you want one more, especially if you've got 3 different squadrons, right? Then that gives you essentially 3 more consumables overall. That helps.
Yeah. I mean, the Bahn is special. Most CVs only have like 3 fighters per
Right.
squadron.
Right.
This Bahn is unique that it has so many.
Now, Yak Diego mentioned doing a fighter build on the Enterprise, which you could absolutely do, right? You could take those and then you could go straight down and then, pick 2 points on something else if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't have the Enterprise myself. It's definitely nasty in a fighter build because the way how fighters works is pretty much each plane in the fighter squadron shoots down one regular plane. So if you have like 6 fighters in your fighter squadron and they engage on enemy planes, they will shoot down 6 of them. And if the enemy squadron was like 9 planes, 3 will survive.
Right, they can still get a strike off.
The Enterprise fighters are huge. Like I think it's 10 fighters in the squadron. So if they latch onto something, you pretty much wipe out the whole enemy squadron. And the patrol radius of them is also really, really big.
Yes. Yes, there's 10 fighters in here. So basically, if they latch onto you, you might as well just hit F and try again and hope that your planes will survive. Because that's it. And you're right, the action radius is 3.6 kilometer, which is huge compared to now.
Actually, 3.6 is standard, but it looks so big on the map, probably because the fighter squadron is so big.
Oh, okay. Really? It's standard? Huh.
Yeah, 3 kilometer is standard, and then you get 2 times 10% from the skills, which is 3.6.
Okay, because like the Serov is 2.5.
Oh, okay. That's a tier 6 though.
Parseval is 3.
Yeah, I think 3 kilometers is standard for tier 8.
So it's a little bit bigger. Yeah, 3 again for the Indomitable. Let's see what the Pobeda is. But in any case, it looks like it's bigger by half a kilometer. Now that's radius.
You have 3.6 here because of your skills.
3.5 is tier 10 standard. Got it. And then, keep in mind this is the radius, which means that the diameter is actually a full kilometer larger, or in this case, 1.2 kilometers larger. That's why the circle looks so big.
Yeah.
And then you buff that even farther with those extra skills, right? So you can go here. I'll just go ahead and frickin' do it because I can. Boom, right? And that's probably... Go ahead.
Just read chat. Enterprise standard 3.6. Yeah, so it is bigger than normal. Okay.
So if I were to build the Enterprise, I might do something like this because my torpedo bombers do a good amount of damage, and so I might as well be able to drop closer to my target. Alternately, I could take improved engine boost and something else. But let's just go ahead and master this, and we'll take a look at what it does to our patrol fighter consumable. Now we're at 4.4 kilometers, so we wipe out a diameter of 8.8 kilometers, which is huge on the minimap. That's a gigantic no-fly zone. So you could definitely do this, especially in ranked or something like that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to let's do German carriers next.
Don't play them.
What? Why?
Don't play the Tech Tree Germans. They're so bad, or at least stop at the Parseval. Why? Because wargaming made them so unfun to play. Okay. After they nerfed the Richthofen and also the Parseval in the most stupid way possible by making the RNG of the dive bombers worse.
Right. They did nerf the AP bombers. I do recall that. And of course,
then you have the rocket delay that makes attacking broadsides harder. It's still.
And then on top of that, any little bump, like a small island, it throws all of your rockets off aim. So it's definitely a much more difficult line of ships to play. I would agree with that.
I can't recommend playing the Tech Tree German CVs to anybody.
So, all right, let's say you're grinding up the Parseval, the tier 8. Core build, as usual, right? And then where would you go from there? Now, I took enhanced aircraft armor simply because you can possibly get into tier 10 games, and I figured, hey, that might help. But you tell me, what would you put on your German carrier?
So if we're talking Parseval or Richthofen, my Parseval is actually only 9 points. I don't have a high point cap for it.
Okay.
I spec my Richthofen actually for the torpedoes because, funnily enough, while those torpedoes are not good, they are the most reliable weapon with the least amount of RNG and involved.
Yep. Yep. Makes
So
sense.
that's why I went with it.
Okay. And it definitely helps you if you're going to hunt, because for Germans, really, the most effective way of dealing with destroyers is with those torpedo bombers. You can make the argument for the AP rockets too, I suppose.
I had it spec'd for the AP bombs initially, like with the AP damage and the bomber speed and everything, but
Right.
like these bombs are just so frustrating. Like if you like those bombs and you want to do it, then you probably want to go for the enhanced armor piercing ammunition. You probably want to go torpedo the
Bomber flight
bomber
control.
speed.
Yep.
You probably also want to take side stabilization in that case. But what I would recommend, though, however, is a 2-point skill for the German ones, and that's the heal. Because the German CVs get a heal on both the bombers and the torps.
Yep.
So that makes definitely sense to take on a German high-tier CV.
Yep. And I actually have that
All
running on my
tech tree
Parsival.
speaking, like we're not talking Zeppelin or Richthofen here, just for the tech tree.
Yep. Okay. Now, Chad asked about secondary memes, and yes, this is TM Grunty discussing Meat Pie Man. Good to see you, by the way. So,
I will never spec secondary on any of my CVs.
aww.
It's a freaking meme. It's not good. Stop doing it.
Not even on your Graf Zeppelin?
Not even on my Graf Zeppelin. No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
My Graf Zeppelin is full torp bomber spec, by the way.
Really?
Yes, really. And I average about 100,000 damage.
Well, that makes sense because the AP bombers on the Graf Zeppelin are so difficult.
They're actually pretty good now.
Right, but
Wargaming buffed those. They are not as bad. Like, if I could choose between Graf Zeppelin bombers or Richthofen bombers, I take the Graf Zeppelin ones.
Oh, interesting. Now, Zeppelin
That's
ones,
how bad the Richthofen is.
Now, the Zeppelin ones require you to come in from the side, if I remember correctly, right? Like you can
do both. You can do both.
Okay.
It's a completely round circle, and
So here's like a meme secondary build, which you could definitely do with the Zeppelin if you really wanted to. I would recommend you do this in brawls with a friend that's got smoke, because then they can just smoke you in close or something like that, like with a kid. But let's be real. What would you do for your Zeppelin carrier? How would you spec that out? You said you spec out for torpedoes?
yeah, I'm fully spec'd out for torpedoes. Let me find my build real quick.
No problem.
I think you got it. Let me.
And then there's 4 points left, so you can, I don't know, go ahead and menace. Just kidding.
There's 4 points left. I have 2 tier 1 skills, and I have the heal for the torps.
Okay. Improved engine
But
boost.
if you really wanted here, like, you could take that secondary battery firing range and dispersion instead. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. Like, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed of doing that on a Graf Zeppelin if you really wanted.
Yeah, Meat Pie Man, Hidden Menace is still a busted skill. We talked about that later or earlier in the chat. Okay. So that's the Graf Zeppelin for you. Somebody in chat was asking about the Lowenhart. So how would you spec your Lowenhart?
Löwenhardt? That's I think that's almost the same build as you had on your Audacious. So I don't have the. No, leave the captain. Let me see your captain that we just had in here. That was almost perfect.
I had Lutyens on it.
So, except I don't have the side stabilization.
Right.
And instead the plane speed, which you don't have here.
Right. And then probably just either last gasp. I'd probably do last gasp.
Yeah, I have last gasp.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Because
So,
you have good bombers there, and you have the torps that are not too bad.
yeah,
So
the torpedoes are slow
I
as
go double
hell.
tier 4s.
The torps are slow as
They
hell.
are.
But what's nice about when you do torpedo bomber, you can at least get closer to your target before you drop, and that helps. I don't think a 5% buff on really slow torpedoes means anything, unfortunately.
It doesn't, because these Löwenhardt torpedoes are even slower than the
Mm-hmm.
regular ones. I think they go like 32 knots instead of 35.
Right.
So it's really bad.
Yeah. Okay. Now, keep in mind, of course, there are special captains, commanders that have enhanced skills. Ovechkin for the Americans, for example, has enhanced survivability expert. You mentioned, was it Cunningham with the boosted aircraft armor?
Yeah. But those
So,
are all pretty much skills that you take no matter what. Obonoyo
mhm,
for Barn as well with the buff survivability expert.
right.
The only thing that is probably a bit unique that you don't necessarily have to take is if you have the Pan Asian Saipan clone.
Shanzang?
Yeah, I think it has if the special Pan Asian captain has buff pyrotechnician.
Yes.
That's a skill you might take, might not want to take.
I have it on mine.
You have it.
Along with survivability expert. Yeah, because why not, right? If they're buffed, take them.
I don't play the Saipan. I don't think the Saipan is very good.
I'd agree with you.
So I'm not sure if I would take that skill and how I would spec it out.
So let's move on then to the ship line that breaks all of the rules of carriers. Russians. Sanctus, thank you very much.
I don't actually like the Russian CVs.
I don't either, but let's talk through how you might build them. And then I ask Chad if there's any other ones specifically they'd like me to talk about. Like Edornikas wants an FDR build, so we'll get to that. So how would you build the Nakimov or the Russian carriers?
I think I built my Nakimov mostly for the skip bombers.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the standard 9 points,
Yep.
then followed up by a bomber flight control
Yep.
and a pyrotechnician.
Okay, for a better chance of getting fires with your skip bombers. Sure.
Right.
Yep, because the thing about skip bombers is, and you don't need an enhanced aircraft armor so much. I'm a bit of a noob, so I threw that on. But most of your planes are going to be striking from outside of anti-air, especially your skip bombers. So you're not going to be flying through a lot of flak at all, which means this doesn't matter. And that's what I was saying.
Yeah, and it's also the planes are so squishy that even with the skill, they might die to a flak puff anyway.
Right. So that's why, like, you probably don't need to take this after all. And Pyrotechnician would be a good pick, I would agree. You could also spec for torps because the torpedo bombers on the Nakimov is ridiculous.
I mean, you have, if you go get rid of your hidden, of your anti-flux thing and spec the Pyrotechnician, you then still have technically 5 points left that you can spec into the proximity views, or take the torpedo bomber and something else, like a 3-point skill, sidestep or something like this, if you want. But the proximity fuse itself is also fine. Like,
yeah, because remember, Nakimov and just the Russians in general, their torpedoes are really close and they just go straight. So you can almost snipe things with it. So proximity fuse is very helpful, and the other torpedo skills are also really handy too.
it's just like they have such a long arm time, so I think the torpedo bomber is actually better because it helps you. Like if you hit with one torp more per drop because you drop closer, that gives you a bigger boost of damage than the 10%.
Yep, I'm respecing right now because I can't stand seeing that I took aircraft armor. So I've got 6 points left. Now here's the problem. Now I'm forced to decide between bomber flight control or pyrotechnician if I want to take torpedo bomber.
You should take the bomber flight control over the proximity fuse, I think, and the pyro. Your choice should be between the pyrotechnician and the proximity fuse, or the torpedo bomber and the proximity fuse.
Yes, me pie man. It only helps if you hit the side of the ship with torpedo protection. Okay, so if that's the case, what am I going to do for my remaining 2 points?
You have 3 points left right now.
Sorry, you're right. 3.
You could go sidestep.
Mm-hmm.
You could also go the swift fish and the
Engine boost, yeah.
engine boost thing.
Yep. I could also go for interceptors, but that would be useless because it's really the 4 that matters.
Interceptors alone makes absolutely no sense.
Exactly. Hi, Niftiness. So, why speed up only one type of squadron? Because in this particular, when it comes to this particular ship, the bread and butter is the skip bombers. So if that's the way that you play, then it makes sense that you want to build that out. And I think that's where I come back to where I started this talk. We're saying, hey, you choose what works best for you. You know,
All the 4-point skills only buff one type of squadron. So
yes. I was just gonna say you
It's
could say the
like-
same thing about proximity fuse. That's only buffing the torpedo bombers.
look at your own games when you play a Nakimov and look, do you do more damage with skip bombers?
Right.
Or do you do more damage with torpedoes? If
Right.
you're the guy that usually deals more damage with torpedoes and likes to use the torpedoes more, then spec for the torpedoes.
Yep.
If you do more with your skip bombers, then spec for the skip bombers.
Exactly right.
You enjoy the rockets? There is nothing that you can do to buff the rockets except for pyrotechnician.
Correct. So, okay, so my 3 points are left. I think I might go for Swift Fish because that helps me. It reduces the chance of the enemy from dodging out of my drop. And then I'd probably go for Improved Engine Boost. And just be done with it. I think that's what I'll probably go with.
Yeah, we can do this.
Done. Okay. Chat, any other ships that you would like us to talk about carrier-wise?
Also,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
go to your modules on the Nakimov, by the way.
Okay. Yes, sir. Ooh. I haven't unlocked my my top tier torpedo bombers yet.
Go to the third slot module.
Mm-hmm.
The skip bomber mod there is really, really good.
Because it gives you that 2
allows you
seconds.
to initiate your skip bomber runs even earlier.
Ah. Okay.
Gives you more time to perfectly aim and keep it aimed.
And you would take that over the torpedo bombers, 5 seconds of additional attack time, huh?
I never needed 5 more seconds on the torps. Usually
Okay.
when I have a torp focused CV, I take the torp speed there.
Mm-hmm.
But with everything that has skip bombers, I use the skip bomber mod now.
Okay. Okay.
Because what happens to a lot, like when I want to aim on the last line and I initiate my run early,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ship maybe wants to turn out a little bit, I actually run out of time to release the drop because the ship is too far away. Those
Okay.
2 seconds with the skip bombers that I have more now help me a lot.
Good to know. Okay. So, if that's the case, and do you take the skip bomber modification too, where you buff your skip bomber's health as well, or do you still just buff the torpedo bomber's health?
I would not take the skip bomber health because you usually want to release your torps from mostly outside the AA anyway.
Right.
So they shouldn't be taking too much damage.
Whereas the torpedo bombers
torpedoes,
will.
They need to fly into the AA. Right.
Good. So I did that right at least.
It's a different story if you had dive bombs or so that really have to go over a ship.
Aha. Okay. Okay. All right. So
Or
chat.
Nakimov torps, I think, is fine.
Chat, are there any other carriers that you'd like us to discuss? If so,
Shall we go over Super Series?
Well, we did have a question about FDR, so let's talk about FDR specifically here for a sec. And how would we build FDR? This is how I've built my FDR. I've basically just used my midway captain because I'm lazy.
It's a premium. You can use your midway captain.
Mhm.
If you have a lot of other USN ships, you
Mhm.
can definitely have a dedicated captain for it. I'm honestly not sure. I don't have an FDR.
Okay.
I was a super tester when it got released, so I played it in super test.
Right, and you
I
can't
didn't
obviously
like
talk
it
about that
because
experience.
I can't say that I don't like it because I don't like slow planes,
Okay.
and I didn't like the huge amount of time between attacks.
Sure.
So I don't like huge times between attacks, and I don't like a single attack. So, which is why I don't like Russian CVs, and I don't like the Roosevelt.
Okay.
So
So
since it got relieved, I don't have the Roosevelt. I haven't played it since then, so I'm not
Okay.
sure what captain skills to take.
So this is how I built the FDR, my FDR, and the reason I built it this way is because it's all about the torpedoes. FDR torpedoes are, I mean, they go out in an external like a W, firing arc, but it's all about getting close to the target and dropping your torpedoes and doing maximum damage. So I have definitely buffed the torpedoes here. As you can see, I went with the core build, like Gruncy mentioned. And then I took site stabilization just because the big thing about torpedo bombers, let me go back to equipment here. If you buff your torpedo bomber's attack time, this one right here, it actually gives you the ability to start your drop sideways. So like you're parallel to your target. And then you curve in and poof, smack them. So you can actually do stupid things if you spec for this. Right, exactly right, Yak Diego. You do the crazy 180-degree drops. So, in my opinion, this is the most important part about the FDR. The captain build also is handy, but this is the biggest thing for your FDR.
But do you actually need the site stabilization for that? They don't bloom up again when you turn, do they?
It helps. Yes, they do bloom
Does
when you
help?
turn.
Okay.
So, so the key to that no scope is you actually have to hold it steady when you're dropping next to the person. You have to wait until your cone drops from ultra wide to close, and then you turn. If you wait until it drops to close and then turn, you're golden. So
Yeah.
site stabilization helps with getting that closer earlier so that you can turn earlier. If that helps, if that makes sense. If your enemy is turning likewise, the quicker that your planes get closer together so you can turn means that the better chance that you're going to get torpedoes on your target. So it synergizes well there.
Okay, makes sense. I was just looking for some points to spare to get the anti-flux skill, but
That's right. Right.
what I can, like, in regards to site stabilization, what I can advise everybody, go on the PTS when it's up. I think it's still up, where the captain respec is free.
Yep.
And then go
Yep.
into a training room.
Yep.
Take a stopwatch, and do some measurements of the CVs you play.
Yep.
Where you measure how long it takes for your reticle to fully shrink with and without that skill.
Yes.
And then make a decision based on that whether you think that skill is worth it for you or isn't.
Yes. And PTS, by the way, is public test server. So when that's available, do it. Now, I'm also going to post a link in the chat here. This is a link to some recommended commander builds. It's not letting me. There we go. You might have to copy and paste instead of clicking on the link. But those are all recommended commander builds for just about every ship in the game. So not just carriers. So you can use that to help you at least get some ideas. Don't just follow it blindly because, like we said at the beginning, your game style might be a little bit different. But you can use this to, kind of dial in what you want. Somebody asked about fighter build on the Chokolov, the Boom Chokolakov. Can you do the fighter build on the Chokolov?
I don't know. I don't have the Chokolov. Never played it.
And my guess is yes, because it does have, it looks like it's got a little bit higher action radius than the other Tech Tree 8s.
The problem I might see is, like, Aren't
Yeah.
Chekov planes not a little bit slow?
They are.
Usually what you want to do when you have a fighter build is you want to have more quick planes so you can get your fighters to where they actually need to be rather quickly.
Yep. In my opinion, here's the other big problem with doing a fighter build anything. Your XP earnings come from damage and kills, not from killing enemy fighters. You might win more, but you're not going to earn as much XP, so it's a bit of a dilemma here
Yeah,
about...
Chekov is ridiculous in damage output too. Like
Yes.
I think I would enhance it on my damage output and farming ships instead of trying to go fighters with it.
Right, and I'm going to change that to Skip Bomber mod after talking with you about this, and I would definitely, yes, like that. See, I'd boost the bombers, yeah.
You can make an argument here that maybe you want the bomber health there because it helps the skip and your regular bombs over the torpedo health.
Oh, I see. I see. Because that helps your bomber HP. Okay. So here's the question now. Let's take a look. We've got our torpedo bombers, our HE bombers, and our skip bombers. So we are at 1510 for each of these. That makes it easy. So let's go ahead and buff the bombers.
What's the top hit points?
Without the skill, without the modification, 1670. It did not help the skip bombers, but it did help the HE dive bombers.
Yeah, I don't know.
So if we torpedo bomber it, then we go to 1780 from whatever I said, 1610. So I think it's still best to do this because your HE bombers on the Boom Chakalakov are mostly going to be against destroyers, which don't have the greatest anti-air anyways.
Fair.
And I think your torpedo bombers, you still want to make sure that those live so you can go and drop those juicy battleships. So there you go.
Probably worth experimenting when you play the ship a lot and you find yourself deplaned on one of these types very often. Then maybe you want to buff, like compared to the other one, like say you run out of torps like within 10 minutes but still have the bombs, then you probably want to buff the top hit points.
Right.
And vice versa.
Okay. Chat, any other carriers to discuss? We've gone through a whole lot. It's a lot for you to digest, so this will obviously go up on YouTube later, and you please consider watching it and thinking about the specific carriers that you play.
Should remove the fighter build? What? Why?
So one of the things that I told Wargaming way back when, in the old RTS system, was I hated the fact that a lot of carrier gameplay was about negating each other and not about dropping the enemy. And in my opinion, carriers should be all about doing damage and not about like this whole like 4D chess where you put your fighters and try to block them and blah blah blah. So I understand that idea. Big O is basically saying, let's focus on damage. Let's focus on hurting enemies and not about like trying to negate the other and counter the other carrier. So, I get it.
See, there's a difference though. In the old RTS CV, if you had a good carrier player, they could cancel out the enemy CV with their fighters
with the strafing
while still attacking
Yep.
on their own if they were good at multitasking.
Yep.
Like in this new system, if you run a fighter build and want to cancel out the enemy CV, you're not attacking yourself at the same time either. So you can't do both at the same time. So it's not as oppressive.
Right. Okay, chat. Well, any other carriers to talk about? If not, we will move on to replays at this point. We've talked about this quite lengthy here, which is great. I mean, carriers I think are somewhat misunderstood, but also kind of,
Aga? I would run a generic top plane build, as we said on the Hyperio earlier.
Yeah, there's the Kaga. Plus, if you've got the Raizu Suzuki, you get a buff to survivability expert. So why not?
I would probably drop the sidestep and take Pyro for
the rockets.
But Kaga has HE bombs, doesn't it?
Does it?
Am I stupid now?
I'm probably stupid. You're right, they are HE. Okay, yeah. Why does the Kaga have 200mm secondaries? Yakadieko, because the Kaga... This ship was supposed to be a battle cruiser, originally. So what the Japanese did was they converted her. If you look at her hull... she is a battleship hull. I mean, look at that, 152mm. Look at the Citadel protection. Let me drop... Am I dropping the right thing? I mean, she had really good... She had really good battleship protection. See, she's actually got a turtleback right here. She's got a deck slope. So she was originally meant... The Kaga was originally meant to be a battle cruiser, if I recall correctly. And then they changed her because of the Washington Naval Treaty forced the Japanese to get rid of some of their battleship construction projects. So as a result, they changed her into a carrier. Now, she's got the 210mm guns simply because of the fact that the Japanese thought, at the time, they thought that they might need to defend the ship. Here's the 210s right down there. Boom. So the thought was that carriers were meant to scout for enemies. Remember, before World War II, carriers were meant to scout and find the enemy. Nobody had any idea that these aircraft would be so powerful as to be able to do ridiculous things. Was it the Akagi? The Akagi actually had a dual... For a while, half of its flight deck was missing on the front. It had a secondary flight deck on the bottom, and the idea about the Akagi was that it could launch fighters from the top deck and from the secondary deck at the same time, and launch your planes that much quicker. So that was the idea, and that's the reason why you see these 210mm or 200mm guns here. It's a holdover from when the Japanese thought that these carriers would still need to defend themselves. The Americans were no different, by the way. When you take a look at the Lexington, the original Lexington had 203mm guns. They had Pensacola-style guns as the secondary turrets, right here, and also in the back, here and here. Later, the Lexington class, which was basically the Saratoga because the Lexington was sunk at Coral Sea, was modified with the 5-inch dual doubles that you see here on the Lexington. But the original model did not have these. The original model was 203mm secondary guns. Again, because...
Beautiful skin.
It is a beautiful skin because the war planners thought the carriers were simply there to scout the enemy and to defend the fleet from land-based bombers. They didn't think that carriers were as powerful as they really were. The Japanese kind of forced everybody to understand that with the strike on Pearl Harbor. You could also argue with the British attacking Taranto in Italy, they did the same thing. But the whole idea is... after that, it's all about anti-air, which is why the Lexington class, which again was only the Saratoga, changed their secondary armament to 5-inch twin mounts because those are dual purpose. They do anti-air as well. Here's our anti-air guns here, 5-inchers. There's our 40s, Bofors, etc., etc. Yes, Pearl Harbor was based on Taranto because the Japanese saw the British attacking the Italian battleships, cruisers, whatnot in a low depth harbor, and said, "Gee, how did the British do it? Oh, the British used wooden fins on their torpedoes. Okay, we'll do the same thing." And the Americans didn't notice that. That's correct. It was the idea. Hopefully you guys can notice. I love World War II. History, especially aircraft carriers. So this is something that's a bit of a passion for me. So, all right. Well, I think we've driven this into the ground at this point. Chat, is there any other questions carrier wise to answer? If not, I think it's time to do some replay analysis, huh? Grunty, is there anything else you want to mention?
No, I think I've said pretty much everything.
This was good. This was good. Well, thank you for jumping in. You're welcome to stay, of course, when we do replay analysis. My favorite carrier, you're looking at it. You're looking at it right here, the Lexington. It's just, I call her Sexy Lexi, and I will always consider her the sexiest of ships. I don't care how she plays in game. I will always consider her the sexiest of ships. She was a battle cruiser that got converted to an aircraft carrier, again, in the Washington Naval Treaty, just like the Akagi and the Kaga. And she was, for the longest time, the longest American aircraft carrier. She had the longest flight deck because she was that battle cruiser hull, which got converted. So yeah, I will always love the Lexington. I'd really love to see an original Lexington with those 203mm secondaries instead of the 5-inch. I think that'd be hilarious. Like, give me a Saratoga, like an original Saratoga, since you've already used the Lexington class. But that's me preaching at this point. Yes, I was just going to mention Constellation. Constellation is her half sister, but the thing about the Constellation is that's also assuming that she got refitted as well. The original Constellation did not include the torpedo bulges that you see here. The original Constellation had casemate secondaries and not these dual 5-inch secondary turrets. And I would love to see an original Constellation. At tier 6 or 7, I don't care. But I'd love to see a Constellation without these ridiculous bulges, without, basically without the fat American battleship treatment. I'd love to see an original World War I-esque, 1920s-esque Lexington, Saratoga battle cruiser. But beggars cannot be choosers. I was very excited to see this. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for listening. Grunty, thanks for chiming in and giving us all of your knowledge. For those of you guys watching on YouTube, please comment what you think about the situation. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing and liking the video, all that good stuff. But we're going to move into replay analysis after we